the way it has gone. And it seems to me that now, well, I think it's fair to say that I responded to this.
At 58, Spencer Tracy knew the secret would outlast him. Carried a forbidden love to the grave in silence. He had survived studios, scandals, and the Hays Code police of morality. He had outplayed gossip columnists who could kill a career in one headline. But age, illness, and faith pressed on his chest like a second heart. What if one whisper undid everything he built? What if one truth erased the saintly image America believed? The cost was sleepless nights, careful phone calls, and doors closed before dawn. Hollywood rewarded silence. It punished honesty. To understand the price he paid, we must begin far from any spotlight. Spencer Tracy was born in Milwaukee in 1900. His father sold trucks. His mother kept order with quiet resolve. The house was Irish Catholic, disciplined, and tender when it counted. Winter meant lake wind and red cheeks. Sunday meant mass and serious clothes. He learned early that duty came first. Milwaukee felt like a humming workshop in those years. Streetcars clanged through soot and snow. Brewery signs promised comfort, then prohibition shut the taps. Ragtime drifted from parlor pianos. Soon jazz broke loose from Victrola horns. Boys wore caps pulled low. Girls pinned bob cuts and eyed flapper skirts. Everything felt restless, modern, and slightly dangerous. He was a talker before he was an actor. Teachers pushed him toward debate. He loved the rhythm of an argument and the thrill of winning. He tried the Navy as the Great War ended. Training grounds taught him order and long mornings. The armistice arrived, and the sea never called again. He came home with posture, patience, and a hunger to prove himself. College opened a door he did not expect. At Ripon, he tested the stage and felt it answer. The footlights warmed his face. The audience lifted his breath. He met classmates who dreamed just as loudly, including a young man named Pat O'Brien. They chased the same spark, and the spark chased them back. Theater life in the early 1920s felt like a traveling school. Stock companies moved from town to town with trunks and hope. He learned to hit marks, save his voice, and stretch a dollar. He learned timing from audiences that coughed, laughed, or stared. The grind was hard. The calling was harder to ignore. New York was louder than any fear. He found the American Academy of Dramatic Arts and Discipline sharpened again. Voice, breath, stillness, and the quiet command of the eyes. He watched great players find truth without shouting. He studied how to make small choices read from the balcony. Pat O'Brien studied too. They tested scenes until midnight. The city kept time with taxi horns. He also met a young actress named Louise Treadwell. She was precise and generous and quick with laughter. Their partnership formed on rehearsal floors and backstage whispers. Marriage would come soon. Real responsibility would follow faster. Life widened beyond curtain calls. America around them pulled in two directions at once. Jazz clubs promised freedom. Blue laws promised punishment. The country roared with cars, cocktails, and radio crooners. Yet it still bowed to pulpits and polite fictions. Respectable men married and kept private matters private. Newspapers treated scandal like sport. People whispered because silence felt safer than truth. The stage gave Tracy a craft and a shield. It offered purpose worthy of his faith and fire. It also offered a mask that could be lifted or fixed as needed. He learned to keep the mask steady. He learned to make feeling look effortless. A few seasons later, the studios would come calling from the West. Broadway gave him a name worth testing on film. The Last Mile hardened his edges. John Ford noticed the contained fury. A screen test captured that volcanic stillness. Fox signed him with cautious enthusiasm. Up the River in 1930 put him opposite a young Humphrey Bogart. Audiences liked the watchful eyes and the clipped patience. He was not pretty. He was not ornamental. He looked like a man you might meet at work, then trust in a crisis. Early pictures came fast and uneven. The power and the glory showed a weary soul buried under ambition. Man's Castle let him dance between tenderness and hunger. Critics began using words like authentic, honest, and unshowy. He spoke in simple rhythms that felt true. Directors saw how he lifted thin pages. Editors saw how a close-up became a confession. The studio wanted a dependable leading man. He wanted roles with moral weather. The two desires often collided. Stories were reshaped to fit his gravity. He could play a laborer, a convict, a cop, or a priest. Fox publicity called him the common man's star. Fan magazines praised a sturdy Midwestern charm. Letters arrived from teachers, firefighters, and nurses. They wrote that he sounded like their fathers and brothers. Fame began to feel like a public trust. In 1935, he moved to MGM. New contract, new polish, new pressure. Metro dressed him in elegant suits and steadied his haircut. They compared him to Clark Gable and Wallace Beery, but kept him set apart. He was the moral anchor in stormy plots. He could deliver a courtroom summation that quieted a theater. He could speak 3 sentences and change an entire scene's temperature. San Francisco paired him with Gable and Jeanette MacDonald. He played Father Mullen, a priest with steady mercy. The earthquake sequence shook the screen. His stillness steadied it again. Audiences cheered the grit and the compassion. Studio executives noticed box office numbers climbing. They also noticed that he did not need showy tricks. The camera liked the truth he could not help bringing. Awards followed soon. Captain's Courageous in 1937 gave him the Weathered Mentor. He won his first Academy Award. Boys Town in 1938 gave him Father Flanagan, a man of principle with open hands. He won his second. Headlines declared him the conscience of MGM. Reporters called him decent, modest, and serious about work. He obliged interviews with shy smiles and few words. He kept the brand clean. The system around him thrummed like a clock. Scripts passed through committees. Morality clauses guarded images like bank vaults. Publicity departments arranged photo spreads in spotless kitchens. Studio heads measured worth in grosses and obedience. A star was a product, maintained with polish and fear. He learned to arrive early, hit marks, and never feed gossip. The 1940s brought tests of range. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde let him explore darkness with nervous control. Woman of the Year in 1942 introduced a sparring match with Katharine Hepburn. Their timing felt dangerous and alive. The pairing sold tickets and columns. Reporters praised the crackle on screen. Executives saw a durable franchise. Invitations multiplied. The work did too. Fame sharpened attention. Strangers studied his smile for clues. Columnists pressed for personality angles. He hated trivial questions. He loved the craft. He kept habits small, schedules precise, and emotions guarded. He knew the studio could protect him and bury him, sometimes in the same week. Everyone in town understood the rules. Play along, stay quiet, do not give the wrong story to the wrong person. He held to the work like a lifeline. He protected privacy with politeness and distance. He shook hands, signed autographs, and left parties early. He learned which restaurants offered a back door. He learned which drivers never spoke to reporters. The public adored a man who looked like decency made flesh. The town watched a man who carried more than work on his shoulders. Success had a cost measured in silence. The spotlight brightened and narrowed. Choices closed like gates on a ranch road. He had become indispensable to MGM, and therefore, closely managed. The camera loved his truth. The system demanded appearances. Between the two, a double life took shape, quiet as a shadow at the edge of a set. The partnership with Katharine Hepburn lit headlines. The other life stayed unprinted. Biographers note a parallel current that never reached the fan magazines. It moved in careful rooms, protected by etiquette and the fear of ruin. It asked for tenderness without names. It offered sanctuary and risk in equal measure. Coded spaces existed in plain sight. Directors held cultivated salons where privacy felt like a promise. George Cukor's living room became a harbor for artists who needed to breathe. Voices dropped when new arrivals appeared. Cigarette smoke softened edges. Laughter rose, then fell when a stranger crossed the threshold. Trust was the currency. Discretion was the rule. Designers and actors formed quiet constellations. William Haynes, once a leading man, and later a famed decorator, entertained friends who understood the rules. He welcomed people with warmth and a quick, protective wit. Guests arrived in staggered cars. Valets learned first names and forgot last ones. Malibu houses kept late hours with curtains drawn against the gossip columns. According to later testimonies, introductions sometimes came through intermediaries who specialized in discretion. Chauffeurs knew which doors opened onto courtyards. Assistants knew which hotels offered private elevators. Some memoirs claim that a former Marine named Scotty Bowers arranged liaisons for anxious stars. His claims remain debated. Yet the broad outline matches an era's necessity. Privacy required a network. That network thrived only when no one spoke too loudly. Contemporaries recalled that Tracy preferred quiet conversations to crowded rooms. He could be solemn, then unexpectedly gentle. He liked night drives along the coast. Engine low, radio barely audible. He liked company that asked for nothing and promised the same. A hand could rest near his on an armrest. The world might narrow to breath and the rhythm of tires. Intimacy found a language without nouns. There were rumored companions who shared sets or social circles. Names surface in diaries and posthumous accounts, sometimes with more smoke than fire. A supporting actor here, a studio publicist there, a war-era stage colleague who reappeared after filming. The claims vary in detail and certainty. Biographers urge caution, yet many agree that he sought moments of safety with men who understood the cost of exposure. They understood that affection had to dodge searchlights. Studio contracts framed the boundaries. Morality clauses could sever income overnight. A single headline could redraw a life. Private detectives sometimes shadowed troublesome stars. Press agents rehearsed cover stories with the cool focus of surgeons. If someone called after midnight, the call might be rerouted through a friendly exchange. If a meeting happened, it happened behind a gate, or 2 towns away, or at an address paid through a third party. Hepburn appears in many accounts as a guardian as well as a partner. She knew the town's signals. She learned which riders bargained and which ones hunted. She helped steer him around ambushes, sometimes by appearing at the right restaurant at the right time. Their public rhythm created shelter. It also created questions. Could the world accept a love that defied its codes? Could the private self ever stand under the Sunday? Faith complicated the map. He was a Catholic of stern conscience. Confession promised mercy, then returned him to the same mortal maze. He sought comfort, then punished himself with work and silence. Drinking blurred the edges when the pressure climbed. Sobriety restored the weight of secrets. Friends described him as both tender and armored, a man who hid sorrow inside the professionalism that audiences admired. Travel offered brief freedoms: touring plays, war bond events, location shoots in desert towns or coastal villages. There, the spotlight dimmed. A rented cottage might allow a weekend of companionship. A whispered plan might survive until Sunday, then dissolve in Monday's call sheet. Letters were dangerous. Notes vanished into fireplaces. Gifts stayed small and deniable. A fountain pen, a scarf that looked borrowed instead of purchased. In the 1940s and 50s, a rumor did not need proof to destroy. Men learned to move like dancers around suspicion. A glance could be misread. A photograph could be cropped. Reporters cultivated waiters and elevator operators. A single misstep could feed syndicated columns for months. The fear made affection more urgent and more fraught. The closest brushes with exposure often came through accidents. A car ride spotted at a strange hour. A neighbor's complaint about late voices. An indiscreet acquaintance rewarded with a lunch and a loose tongue. Publicists doused sparks with alibis and phone calls. Still, the town's whisper network kept humming. Every saved career left a trace of panic behind it. Tracy learned to divide days into spheres. Work demanded clarity. Private hours demanded shadows. The gap between them widened with each success. He could hold the screen with absolute candor, then close the dressing room door on everything that candor cost. The city fed on talent. It also fed on secrets. His choices reflected the only survival plan the era allowed. By the mid-1950s, the stakes tightened again. Television spread faces to every living room. Scandal traveled faster. The Supreme Court had not yet rewritten speech laws for the tabloid age. Police raids filled columns after midnight. A single arrest, even for loitering at the wrong doorway, could end him. The risk became a constant drumbeat, steady and terrifying. The next knock could be a friend. It could be a photographer. It could be a cop. The fear gathered into one question he could never answer in public. How long could a private heart survive in a public body? He tried to balance tenderness with vigilance, faith with hunger, duty with the need to be held. The calculation exhausted him. The costs accrued in silence. And then, as whispers grew bolder, the first real crisis arrived. The first real crisis arrived as a column of innuendo. A blind item hinted at a star with 2 lives. Readers could do the arithmetic. Names were not printed, but circles tightened overnight. The item landed on executives' desks before breakfast. Phones lit up. Publicity chiefs drafted counter-stories with practiced speed. Studio lawyers read morality clauses like prayers. They reminded him that image was capital. One scandal could cancel a slate of pictures. He listened, nodded, and clenched his jaw. The logic sounded merciless and, in that town, unavoidable. A meeting followed with the head of publicity. Appear at this benefit. Pose with this co-star. Smile with practiced warmth. Be seen in the right places at the right times. Reporters hovered. Hedda Hopper called for a friendly interview. Luella Parsons wanted a quote. Refusal would read like guilt. Acceptance meant a dance across eggshells. He chose the neutral path. He spoke of work and charity. He praised colleagues. He offered nothing that could be twisted into fire. The tone was cordial and distant. The way pilots speak when fuel runs low. Alcohol became a shadow companion when pressure peaked. He had battled it before. It waited at the edges of long days. Now it stepped closer. Sleep was light and broken. Food tasted like obligation. He arrived early to sets, then stayed late to avoid questions in daylight. Friends found him quiet, courteous, and walled off. Politeness covered fear, but only just. The body keeps accounts, the mind tries to forget. Diabetes demanded attention. Exhaustion demanded the rest. He refused. Doctors warned him gently, then sternly. He worked anyway. The work kept his world in order. The work also pulled him toward collapse. A small scare led to a hospital room and dark corridors. Nurses spoke softly. Doctors spoke of moderation and balance. He promised both, then returned to the schedule. The columnist did not forget. A second blind item sharpened the outline. Again, no names. Again, people understood the map. The studio sent him on a goodwill tour. War bond experience had taught him the public lift of crowds. He shook hands, visited hospitals, and honored a charity. Cameras captured gratitude and decency. Papers ran photos above the fold. The spotlight turned, for a time. The emotional cost deepened. The marriage, already strained, grew colder. He remained devoted to his children, especially his son, who lived with silence from birth. Fatherhood cut through the fog and guilt. He sent steady support. He protected them from columns and cameras. He asked friends to keep family out of their mouths. Loyalty was the rule he never broke. Hepburn stood close without stepping into the trap. She knew how to manage distance and signal solidarity. A lunch here, a premiere there, and then long stretches of strategic quiet. They held to a rhythm that calmed speculation. The arrangement looked like restraint. It felt like sacrifice measured in days and miles. Confidential magazine rose in the 1950s and hawked scandal like candy. Its reporters courted bellhops and hairdressers. Its pages terrified the town. Legal fights brought delays, but fear did the daily work. He adjusted again. Private meetings were rarer and shorter. Trusted drivers altered routes. Publicists rehearsed statements that said little and satisfied less. The craft became refuge and punishment in the same breath. He poured the unsaid into scenes. Directors saw a new gravity and filmed it closely. The audience felt the ache without knowing its source. Box office held. Awards whispered again. Each success built a higher wall to protect and to breach. The paradox tightened around his ribs. Years of evasion left him tired and vigilant. The man who spoke for decency on screen led a private life patrolled by alarm bells. He kept working because work meant control. He kept silent because silence meant survival. But the crisis had done its damage. Health, home, and spirit carried scars that makeup could not hide. The only way forward was through a smaller life, chosen with care. A smaller life did not mean a smaller craft. He learned to say no. He chose parts that carried moral weight and human ache. Father of the Bride showed a father's worry sharpened into love. He smiled less in interviews and more between takes with friends. He saved energy for the camera. The lens still trusted him. Health demanded careful bargains. Diabetes set strict hours. Doctors lectured regularly. Crew members kept orange juice near the mark. He tried to keep the balance. He sometimes lost it. Work steadied him when faith and fear wrestled. A scene could hold him upright when sleep would not. He let the words carry him across shaky mornings. The pairing with Katharine Hepburn matured into a practiced tenderness. They knew how to protect each other in public. They also knew when to guard the quiet. Desk set gave them banter that sounded like relief. They kept movements efficient and conversations soft. She watched the clock and the temperatures on set. He appreciated the vigilance and rarely said so aloud. The marriage remained a promise he would not break on paper. He and Louise Treadwell lived apart, yet shared commitments that mattered deeply. Their son required steady, specialized care. He provided without pause. He visited when schedules allowed. He kept letters warm and direct. Duty and affection held their own stubborn shape. No headline could summarize it cleanly. As the 1950s closed, the industry changed. Television took hold and habits shifted at home. Scandal sheets lost some power to shock but kept their bite. He measured exposure carefully. He avoided parties that felt like traps. He entered through side doors and left through kitchens. The old map still worked. He followed it with a veteran's caution. Then came roles that felt like a summation. Bad Day at Black Rock revealed quiet courage under civic suspicion. Judgment at Nuremberg asked him to weigh moral catastrophe without grandstanding. He met that challenge by almost whispering. Audiences leaned in to hear a conscience speak. The work felt heavier and simpler, like a prayer stripped of ornament. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner arrived as the country argued with itself. The script pressed against old prejudices with a smile. He was tired, often ill, and sure of the message. He filmed between hospital visits and scheduled rests. Hepburn watched the takes with a face like flint and sunlight. He delivered scenes with the calm of a man finishing a long oath. Friends say he softened toward the end. Less guarded laughter, more patience for young crews. He complimented a dolly grip's smooth track. He shook hands with extras at wrap. He grasped that a set is a small city of ordinary hopes. Fame mattered less than the kindness that kept a day moving. He also watched the world inch forward. Young actors spoke bolder truths about private lives. The old terror lifted slightly, then settled again. He did not expect to see full daylight. He wanted younger people to have it. He knew the courage it required. He also knew the toll. In quiet hours, he wrote short notes to friends. He apologized less for being human. He thanked more for patience and help. He visited church when strength allowed, and let silence speak for him. He had carried secrets, love, and regret longer than most careers last. The late work distilled it all without confession. In June 1967, his heart failed on a calm morning. He was 67. The town paused and grew solemn. Tributes called him honest, compassionate, unpretentious, and essential. Audiences mourned a familiar presence in their living rooms and memories. Hepburn wept out of sight. The family tended to grief with dignity. Respect closed ranks around privacy one final time. His legacy grew clearer as years passed. He showed that acting could be humble and immense at once. He proved that decency on screen could be compelling, not bland. He reminded people that the most dangerous stunts happen within. When the world was cruel, he answered with truth spoken softly. That choice left a mark no scandal could erase. The lesson he left feels urgent even now. A life can be built from work, care, and careful mercy. A heart can hold contradictions without becoming false. The mask can be a tool, not a lie, when survival leaves few options. and love, however hidden, still alters the room. That belief carries us to the final reckoning. Spencer Tracy's life reads like a vow kept under fire. He mastered the art of restraint, then turned that discipline into feeling. He let the screen hold his storms while the town demanded calm. He loved carefully, spoke softly, and carried a truth that could not be spoken aloud. He knew a single headline could shatter a soul. He refused to let a headline define his own. What remains is not a scandal, but a question. How much of ourselves do we give to survive the times we live in? He answered, with work that honored ordinary courage. He answered with loyalty when loyalty was hard. He answered with tenderness disguised as composure. Audiences felt that honesty, even when they did not know its source. The heart recognizes a fellow traveler. His films still remind us that decency can be dramatic, that a quiet man can move mountains by moving no more than his voice, that love, however hidden, shapes the choices that shape a life. We inherit his contradictions alongside his craft. We honor them by granting the living the dignity he fought to keep. If this story moved you, tell me what moment struck deepest. Was it the first blind item, the guarded dinner, or the late performance filmed between hospital checks? Share your thoughts below. Subscribe for more untold histories from old Hollywood, where courage often wore a careful smile. And remember the simplest lesson he left behind. You can protect yourself and still protect the truth inside you. You can speak softly and still change the room.